Hello and welcome to the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from Baselode Energy and Forum Energy combining into a Pro-Forma company under Baselode Energy, traded on the TSXV under the ticker FIND, and on the OTCQB under the ticker BSENF. And I'm joined today with the President and CEO of Baselode Energy, Dr. Rebecca Hunter. And now, Rebecca, there will be a future name change to Geiger Energy, and it will be traded on the TSXV under BEEP, B-E-E-P. How's that for a lot of tickers and companies? But what's happened here is we have Rebecca Hunter leading the charge in the new Pro-Forma company. Now, it's going to take about a month before that name change actually happens and has to be voted on. But Rebecca, you put out news to the market today that it's official that Forum and Baselode are now combined. Walk us through the business combination here between the two companies, the technical part of the deal itself, but also the thinking behind it, the rationale behind combining these two sets of property packages with a similar outlook on geology, looking for unconformity deposits in both the Athabasca Basin and the Thelon Basin. Give us the skinny here on the combined Pro-Forma company.
All right. Okay. It's nice to be here. Thanks, Shad. So the merger completed today. So in just kind of the background on that for everyone, just as a reminder. So Forum is now become Baselode. Baselode's a surviving entity. And so the kind of share structure that involves is Forum, the exchange ratio is 0.3535. So essentially about 3-to-1 Forum to Baselode shares into the new company. And then of course, for the new company, so in about a month, like Shad mentioned, so we'll have the deal closing now, and then in about a month, Baselode will have a shareholder meeting to approve the name change to Geiger and the consolidation. So there'll be a 5-to-1 consolidation of the merged entity here that starts today. And so that's kind of the overall, and then again, the rest of it is kind of, merging of the two companies management wise. So again, like Shad said, I'll be the president CEO of Geiger, and James, the past CEO of Baselode, he'll be coming on as a director of Geiger. And the board itself is just going to be a merger of both Baselode and Forum. So there'll be 3 Baselode directors and 2 Forum directors. So the other Forum director, I'll be a director as well. And the other Forum director will be Janet Meiklejohn, who is on our board with Forum. So that's kind of the overall thing. We've kind of been talking about it a lot as kind of a marriage of brains and capital and vision. And so the overall kind of why and what's, really the key takeaways is it is bringing two companies together with kind of that outside the box vision. So both, I think, James and Baselode, as well as Forum, we both kind of have this outside the box outlook on looking for discoveries and these important prolific basins that host uranium. So that's kind of the number one thing. I think we're a really good fit that way. And then the other one is for Forum in particular is, the uranium market has kind of been in a bit of a lull. It's not really down, but it's not really exciting. And so it's pretty hard to raise money. And in order to do the Thelon Basin, to explore, to advance, it does require capital to do that and focus. And so the merger really allows us to explore. And when the deal was announced, became public in late June, we basically were ready to pull the pin and start exploring in the Thelon Basin. And so we started having our drills turning in about mid-July. And so that would not have happened without this merger, and that's a big component of why this is important.
Well, we're going to get into both sets of projects here, but just before we do, from a high level, you mentioned it's the coming together of the brains and the understanding. And I've talked to both you and James for a while, for years, both of you really, and you are both out of the box thinkers as far as looking for unconformity style deposits for uranium in places that have been overlooked. So in the case of Forum, looking in the Thelon Basin, where most companies are focused in the Athabasca Basin, and there's just a lot of areas that have never even been tested for unconformity style deposits because most of the deposits that Orano was looking for was basement hosted. And then when you think about baseload, what James has been doing is going around to some of these peripheral areas and projects that he thinks are high prospectivity for unconformity style of deposits and using what he's been dubbing as the Athabasca 2.0 philosophy. Same kind of idea, but just areas that hadn't previously been tested or gotten that kind of work or weren't testing that thesis. So for people that are not geologists, for people that just want to know that, hey, are you guys going to make some good uranium discoveries? Talk to people listening in from a high level about why these unconformity style deposits are so attractive because of grade and how valuable the rock can be.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like I'm really hitching my post to the Thelon Basin because you've got a basin here that has all the same characteristics as the Athabasca, but just hasn't been explored to not even a close extent that the Athabasca has. And so, for both of us, James and I, we're on a discovery track. Like we're very focused on trying to be in the areas that can host the next deposits. He's been a part of some, exceptional discoveries. And then I've had a taste of that with, some of the ones in the Thelon Basin, which were basically the first discoveries since Orano days, the 80s essentially when they found theirs. So we're on a discovery sort of mission. And in order to make discoveries, you need to have the right geology. And so for me, the Thelon Basin has all of that, just needs the time. We're still working out the model to some degree, like in the Athabasca, the model's a bit easier. It's not easy to find these deposits, but they have their nice little conductors. They chase them, they can image them well, and then they get those conductors are the faults, and then they drill them, they see if it's altered, they move in from there. In the Thelon Basin, a little different. You've got We use the gravity anomalies, which gives you the clay. And then, but clay halos are quite a bit wider and less discrete than conductors. And so our search space is a bit bigger, and then we got to hone in from there. So just a bit of a different model, but takes a little bit of time to kind of hone into all that. So, but again, you got the James's vision with the Athabasca 2.0, looking for these high grade deposits in the Athabasca in a little less traditional areas. And then I'm, kind of bringing that in a similar way, but looking for, again, high impact discoveries that I think that are there. I know they're there. It's just trying to find them. All the different, Athabasca has these big deposits. You got the Cambalgi has these big deposits. They all look a little different, and it's just a matter of time until we can hone into the right corridor, the right system to find one of these big ones also in the Thelon Basin.
All right, so I think that's a good primer to set up the work program that's currently underway, and we will definitely circle around to some of the baseload properties in this discussion, but let's start off with some of the forum properties that came in just from people from both families here in this marriage that are coming together
Yeah.
so they understand them a little bit better. So if we vector in on the Thelon Basin at your Aberdeen project, last year you did some work on some of the known but expanding basement hosted targets and
Yeah.
deposits. You worked on Tadagac, you worked on Kavik. You got results, you expanded them as expected, but that's not the huge prize. That's more the Orano style, and it's definitely good, and it's definitely shallow mineralization that could be economic. But you're really looking at some of these unconformity style targets at Aberdeen, and you tested a couple of them last year, like Ida and Loki, but you're going back to a couple of these targets, Loki, Bjorn, Tarzan, and Lobster. Talk to us about these targets. Talk to us about the drill program underway.
Yeah, so last year was very much about, again, like you said, expanding, showcasing, Tadagak and Kavik. And again, the potential there is still big, but it's going to take a lot of drilling to basically expand them. They're, these very steep fault systems, and they can be tricky to kind of chase, and they're all cut up and broken up. So we definitely learned a lot, but there's a lot to keep going there. But again, it's about the prize, and it's about shareholder value. What can we find that's going to be a game changer? And so the strategy is to facilitate that. And the way to do that is look for these higher impact discoveries. And so we have all these trends, and we've shown at some of these trends, we have sandstone, and it's fairly shallow sandstone, which is even better. So, under 200 meters, 250 meters. And it's showing that sort of building block of alteration, which hasn't been demonstrated before. So, yeah, like you said, you got the Urano deposits. Those are very classic basement hosted systems, but we have the first evidence of the kind of alterations you have in the sandstone, which could mean mineralization at the unconformity. And in the Athabasca, of course, those deposits are the largest. So that's what we want to focus on primarily is kind of finding those big impact discoveries that could be, a MacArthur River or could be a Cigar Lake or some of the bigger deposits at the unconformity. And then, of course, not forgetting that you can get these big systems in the basement as well. And so a couple of our targets that we're chasing this year is Tarzan and Lobster. They have huge clay anomalies in the basement, just as big or bigger than Tadagac. And so we're chasing those as well and trying to see if, we got an arrow type system or eagle point system as well.
Yeah, so you may get a little bit of the best of both worlds if you have some basement hosted and some unconformity kind of overlapping there. But the prize is these unconformity deposits, and when you vector in on them, you kind of start with the faulting, then you go for the alteration, and then once you find the
Yeah.
alteration, then you start looking for the obviously the radioactive signature that uranium is there, and then vectoring in on the geochemistry to kind of find these little discrete packages of very high grade, very valuable rock, the uranium deposits at the unconformity. So when you do this drill program, what will success look like? Because it's not something like a big copper deposit where you just drop a deep hole and say, oh, yeah, look at all this copper. You kind of have to vector in on these targets. So maybe talk about setting the right expectations for the drill program underway.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's trying to get that across to everyone. Like in the Thelon, we're a district play. So, and even for me, this can be a bit tricky just because we got multiple trends. So when you're thinking about lots of the Athabasca counterparts, they have several projects, but typically on a lot of their projects, they're chasing up one trend. The unique thing about the Thelon and the Nunavut Aberdeen project is actually we had tens of trends. We have so many trends, and all of these trends, like so you got the Judge Systems fault is a big major trend that has Tadagac on it. You have the Thelon trend, which has Ned on it and Bjorn, and then you got Kavik, it's a separate trend. You Lobster, that's separate. Tarzan, separate. So you've got these big trends and they are all demonstrating, major hydrothermal systems on them. And so that's that alteration. Well, first of all, it's a fault. That's what those trends are, the faults. And then also all these trends that we've tested have the hydrothermal system. And so success to me is knowing that these systems are they're very discrete. They can be very tricky to find even when you're in them. Tadagac is a super example of that. Like we were in it and it can be tricky because again, there's micro complexities within these systems bigger than, the macro complexities of the whole project. So for me, success is first we're drilling these fault zones, we're drilling these trends, and we're getting alteration. That's first success because then and significant alteration. You know that the system is there. And then, the second big, for me, just even a sniff at the unconformity, just showing that we have that potential, I think, is the start of the game-changing trajectory that I think can be very important up there.
Okay, so we'll be looking for some of these results coming in from Loki, Bjorn, Tarzan, and Lobster. Do you have a rough idea of how many meters you're going to drill, how many holes you're going to drill?
What we're going to have, I think, is about 15 to 20 holes, and hopefully about 4,000 meters in the end is what we're going to have. We're going to go hopefully mid-September, and if the weather is nice and behaves, we'll go as far as we can, even early October.
Okay. Well, we'll keep following along with that. But the idea is looking for these unconformity prizes, but it's a series of scientific and geological steps to vector in on them. And so you'll probably learn a lot from this program and know where the follow-up drilling will be at each of those targets. Because, like you say, there's multiple trends and multiple targets. So you'll probably vector in on the ones that show the best results, obviously, and then go back but there's also a lot of targets you're not even going to get to in this program that you still have for the future. So before we move off of Aberdeen, maybe just speak to the prospectivity of all the other targets you've already identified that won't even get drilling yet, but they're still out there waiting in the wings.
Yeah, so there's so many. And so like we had to be very strategic and quick this summer because the merger was announced on the 23rd or 24th of June, and we couldn't really get started until then. So we have already had an abbreviated season in order to do the exploration this year. And so we've had to be fairly strategic, logistics wise, helicopter wise. So yeah, tons of targets that we can't even get to. So, I have a series of really high priority targets kind of in the very north end of the property, Thor and Squiggly and Lightning. They have funny names, but they're all, again, subsidiary faults to the Thelon and Judge. You got, mag signatures that look like there's mag destruction. You got faults. So couldn't get there. And then there's a whole schwack of them to the south as well that are along trend of basically Aranos deposits, kind of along similar kind of structural corridors that seem to influence that mineralization that they have. Didn't get those. Again, Tadagak and Kavik. So I would like to dedicate like a drill on each to delineate them. That's what they need. So we didn't get to that. Or, Ira, I'm not going to get to that this summer. And that's one that's been in my back pocket a long time. Again, as I've shown in presentations and stuff, it has that crazy alteration in the sand and weak mineralization in the sandstone as well. So some sort of unconformity process happening there and could be a key area that actually has an unconformity deposit lurking in that alteration.
Well, definitely a lot of targets to go after in the future. And then, as you say, it'd be nice to put some drills back on Tadagak and Kavik to keep expanding the mineralization at those more basement hosted deposits. Now, there's one other component of Forum that we'll get to just really briefly here is you had a package of about 9 properties in the Athabasca Basin. Some of them have joint ventures on them. Some of them are available for option. Some people that were with Forum, or maybe some of the baseload shareholders that are not familiar with your land package, may wonder what's happening with all those projects. I guess at this point, since they're not going to be the core projects, they give you some optionality to potentially maybe option them out again, or what would you do with those other projects you have in the Northwest Athabasca area?
So for the Northwest Athabasca, that's currently in an option agreement. So we'll be advancing that as we see fit. And so hopefully this next winter with Global Uranium's capital, we'll be able to advance that. We've lots of good targets. We had a very short drill program in 2025, and we, because of the weather and because of the short nature of the program and doing all the logistics, we had to build a camp, all these sorts of things, which is now all done and all ready to go. We didn't get to explore too much. And so the Spring Bay and Andy and some of these good targets that we wanted to get to, we didn't. So that's still in our back pocket. So, hopefully, this winter we might be able to advance that project as well. The rest of our projects are all in good standing. So again, like you say, there's optionality, as the market progresses, we could get other partners doing work on that. So again, we have lots of options, but for the majority of for all of our portfolio, we can sit and wait till we get, the proper partners or the proper time to work those properties.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon for uranium companies, especially exploration companies, to have a dozen or 2 dozen different projects under their umbrella because they can, at different points in the cycle, either monetize them or bring in a partner and kind of use a prospect generator model on some of them. So you got some optionality in the Athabasca with those forum projects. Now let's go shift over to some of the baseload projects that are part of this Pro-Forma company. And when I've talked with James in the past, we mostly focused on the Hook project at ACKIO, but there were other targets on Hook that he was interested in. And then I know you have some projects in the Key Lake trend, like Bear and Catharsis. So let's focus on the ACKIO target at Hook, because I think that's going to be your winter program.
Exactly. So what, the merger in general like sets us up to have, a great summer project. So that's the Aberdeen and the flagship. And then in the winter, Hook-ACKIO is a perfect project to expand during that time. And so some of the stuff, the latest stuff that James and Cameron were doing on the Hook project, they outlined some significant clay alteration systems and stuff like that. And so there's huge similarities too in the geology and those kind of alteration systems that they've discovered there to Tadagak and the Thelon stuff. So there's a lot of synergies there. But the big thing is to get in there in the winter and drill those clay alteration systems and see what we can find.
Well, and when we've talked in the past, James and I, we were talking about these different pods. I think there was pod 7 where there was
Yeah.
some work, and pod 4, and there's so maybe just speak to how the geological models are similar in the approach, but maybe just slightly different because they're in slightly different areas.
Yeah, so I mean the geology is slightly different, but a lot of it is the same in the fact that there's no conductors. So it's the same challenge that, we have in Thelon, they had at Hook and Accio, is that you don't have these conductor systems. So you have to actually find the alteration and then hone in. And again, the alteration is, hundreds of meters wide as well as deep. You've got these kind of basement, and same with Hook and Accio, or you've got these basement hosted systems, multiple pods. And so you're finding these types of systems at depth. And so that's what we'll also be looking for in those other kind of altered systems that they found on the Hook property.
All right, so it sounds like it's going to be a busy year and moving into next year at all these different projects. Just as we wrap up here, Rebecca, I guess paint the bigger picture vision of how this business combination into the eventual Geiger Energy is setting you guys up for success because of not just the potential for big discovery, but also, you've combined two different shareholder bases here into a more solid company that makes you stand out amongst the uranium exploration companies.
Yeah, and I think, bigger's better. We have combining, like I said at the beginning, is kind of two very similar kind of visions. James's Athabasca 2.0 and his trying to push the envelope and the boundaries of what you can discover in the Athabasca and combining that with me and my vision in a totally different basin, but the same sort of thing. And so I think that makes us stronger. James, remain on the board, obviously as you know, all the people who've interviewed him, all the shareholders of Baselode know how technically inclined he is. And so he's very excited about this project. He's the reason why it was brought to Baselode in general, that, the Aberdeen Forum and Baselode should merge. And so he is very instrumental in that. And so, I think bringing that vision together, I think for Forum, going forward, or it's going to be Geiger, but just in general, like our portfolios and stuff, focus on Aberdeen primarily, and then Hook-ACKIO, secondary, just having a very strategic focus on very high quality projects is important to me, and working them well and working them so that you can make those discoveries. Discoveries take time. These trends, again, these deposits can be quite small, and actually you can be very close to them. Like even Kavik on our property alone in the Thelon, there was about 10 holes drilled into that anomaly prior to our discovery hole, like by previous people historically, some of which were 5 meters away from surface mineralization. So it wasn't even that they didn't drill deep enough. It's just they didn't drill in the exact spot. So it takes a little bit of time. I think it takes that perseverance. And I think both the visions of James and I coming together, I think we both have that perseverance and that real drive for discovery. And that's what's really going to make this company stand out.
Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, but I really appreciate you breaking down the larger vision of bringing these two companies together, two project packages together, but with the Aberdeen project and the unconformity projects in the Thelon Basin being the flagship, but then obviously a strong secondary, almost twin flagships when you have the Hook-ACKIO project there. And you can kind of stagger the drill programs, different seasonality factors as well between the two companies, a similar shared vision for exploration, a similar shared vision to find these big unconformity style deposits that can be tiny packages, but very dense, very high grade, and incredibly economic when one is discovered. So, a lot of discovery focused news on tap. We'll definitely keep following along with the drill results as they start coming back in. Definitely keep us posted, Rebecca. We'll get you back on for an update once you got some assays back. And then looking forward to all the news flow for everybody listening in. If you want to follow along with the news flow, definitely click on the link below. It takes you over to the Baselode Energy website for now, and we'll keep tabs on the name change over the next month or so. Eventually, that will shift to Geiger Energy, but definitely appreciate you breaking it all down for us. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Shad.